Everybody, welcome back to Everyday Journey. Today we're going to go over the Arduino a little bit and things I want to do for my greenhouse and the problems I'm having at the moment. So first off, I want to be able to control things like the vents for the greenhouse, both in the top to allow air to escape up at the top and actually come in at the top too. So both the intake and exhaust for the greenhouse. Then I want to take care of the rollers to roll up the sides, and then I want to take care of fans if I need to blow air out after it starts getting way too hot, and to circulate air throughout. And then I want to take care of the temperature, obviously, so it can control those things, and then have it to where I have automatic timers for spraying, for watering the plants. So all that stuff's not going to come right off the bat. So I'm basically going to try and tackle everything one at a time. Very first thing I want to tackle though is the vents, because if they're opening up at the top and letting it, letting the hot air exhaust out of there and letting in new air too at the same time, that's going to do wonders. And that all operates off of a temperature controller or a thermometer. So this right here is basically just doing a test to see the operation of this thermometer to go along with the Arduino and have it be able to regulate something. So this thing is set up, and real quick, we'll just show how this thing is working. This thing is it's set up right now to control this relay, and that relay will come on and turn on. Let's say the temperature gets up to 67 degrees, which is what this is set at the moment, which is not needed, but let's say it's 67 degrees. That means it's getting too cold. So this motor ideally would then turn on in reverse to close the vents, and then at 80 degrees would turn on to open the vents in forward direction, so that it would open up the vents and let the air out. So those are the two temperatures this is currently set up at. What I have this set up at the moment, just as a test, is it's reading the temperature through this, and you can't see it here because I don't have a display screen for it, but on my computer you can see it. You just do the serial monitor for it, and you can see what it's doing. And sure enough, once it gets, when it's cold, I have this thing set up to about every second or so, it will turn on the relay, turning on the motor for just a minute, just for a few seconds, and then turn it back off. And then it reads the temperature again. And as long as it's still low, it will do it again. And basically what it's going to do, ideally, is it's going to, let's say it's actually setting up, it's getting hot in there. So it's not hot yet, so it's just sitting there waiting, and then it gets too hot. Well, then it needs to open up the vent. Well, you don't want it to just turn on and just all the way up, because you'd like it to do it gradually. You want it to let the air still escape, but you don't want it to escape too much. You don't want it to get too hot, or you don't want it to get too cold immediately. So you turn it on for a few seconds. It reads the temperatures, does it again, reads the temperatures, does it again, reads the temperature. And eventually, once it gets to a point to where the temperature is high enough, it just stays all the way open. And that's the way you'd like it to be. And you'd like it to do the same thing in reverse. So what this thing is set up as is it reads the temperature, and this is just a test version. You can upgrade the motors. I've got a tiny little motor on here. You can upgrade the motor, and I'll show you that in a second, the ones I'm thinking about using. And then you can also upgrade this. This currently has a relay that is only turning on and off one thing. So it can't do anything to reverse the polarity so that the motor goes in reverse. But as a test, this does show that it will read the temperature. it will then react to the temperature and do something with it, which in this case is turning on the relay, and then the relay is then turning on the motor. And that right there, you can then adjust everything as you need to. With that in mind, here are some of the problems I'm having. First off, the motors that I've got. I chose to get these motors out of the car that I've got that probably is going to go to a scrapyard. A buddy of mine asked me to take it away. He signed it over to me because he wrecked it, and it was going to be, basically it's totaled. Well, the problem with these motors is that they can run up to about somewhere between 5 to 10 amps, which means it's pulling a lot of current all at once. I do have a motor controller that would be able to hook to this and would be able to allow the motor to go forward and reverse, but it doesn't have enough amperage to it. So I've ordered some other ones that's supposed to go up to about 43 amps, so that then I should be able to control a much larger motor, something with a bigger draw for amps, which then would be these motors that I'm going to probably use. Well, the other problems I'm having are the display for the temperature. I mean, it's fine and dandy to have it hooked to your computer, but my computer's not going to be out in the greenhouse. So I would like to have a display. These little kits that you can get for the Arduinos, they're great to learn from, but the display that they give you, just a little 2-line display, it doesn't have anything to actually control it. Basically, it would take up too much of the pins and stuff on this Arduino to be able to hook to it and use, and still be able to do other things with it. So in order to lessen the amount of pins that are used on this Arduino, I'm just ordering another one that should be able to connect up with just a couple of wires. And then I'll have something though that I can display the temperature out there. That way, if I'm walking out there and let's say I do have it to where it's set for 80 degrees. When it gets 80 degrees in there, I want it to open up the vent, and then when it gets hotter than that, maybe then turn on fans. But if I'm like walk in there and I think, man, it's really hot in here, but the vents aren't open yet, I don't know what temperature it is. So if I've got a display, I can read it. That'll be great. I can say, hey, it's 80 degrees and that vent's not open yet. We've got a problem. One other issue I've got is this battery here. This is what I plan to use it. It's fully charged now, according to this. This Arduino, it runs off of somewhere between 6 and 9 volts. So I need something to step that voltage down, because if I hook this directly to here, it's going to just fry it. So in that case, I've got a little buck converter. These things are only $2 or $3 a piece. I think the motor controller I was talking about before, I'll try to find prices for it, but individually they're somewhere around $10 or so. These are not very expensive. These Arduinos are only, buy one separately and you might pay $7 or something. So I mean, a lot of these things can be done really cheaply. The majority of the cost I've got for things is this battery right here. This is a very expensive battery, considering, but it should work well, should work for a long time, and that's all that matters to me. And it'd be a great test thing for if I later get solar power here on my farm. So that's another issue, is getting that little buck converter, and I'm going to get it to where it's adjustable and you can read what voltage it has on it. They have some where you can't read the voltage, but if you're paying a few cents more for one, might as well get the one where you can actually just look at it and see what it says. It's much better that way. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to break out the multimeter to troubleshoot anything. So one other issue I have is the connection for these louvers, these vents that I'm going to use. You see here, I pulled them out of this camper that I got for the chickens, and I do intend to use it for the chickens later still. I just have kind of gotten a few setbacks, and I'll let you know about that later whenever I do finally get to doing that again. But they don't need the louvered windows in there at the moment. I can use those for the greenhouse instead. But connecting to that, to the louver where it actually will turn and then open up the louvers, that's going to be a little bit of an issue. This motor here, which I guess I can't really tip it up, this is the window motor, and it's strong enough, should do just fine, but the connection between the motor shaft and that other shaft that actually would turn the little crank handle, here's the crank handle, and you would just normally just crank this up and that would make the window louvers open. Well, connecting this to that so that it would then open and close like it should, that's going to be, That's going to be an issue in itself. I don't know how exactly I'm going to do that, whether it's build an adapter for it, whether I do JB weld, whether I do some little pulleys for it, something like that. We'll just see what works best. I would like to have it to where it comes back apart, so that wouldn't be an issue. And so like things like epoxy I wouldn't really want to use if that were the case. And but these motors, you know, they just, you turn them on, and you can vary the time that you turn them on. So let's say you turn it on for 3 seconds, but it doesn't know how far it's moving something in 3 seconds. The only thing you can do with is turn it on for a few seconds, and then, like I was doing, have it turn back off, and then read, and then turn it back on if need be, and eventually open something all the way up. Well, when it gets to all the way open, then you need something like a limit switch. And I do have some limit switches, but there are lots of different kinds, and I'm not sure if the kinds I have will work. But then we got to program that into it, because it's got to know, excuse me, it's got to know when it gets to that end of travel that it needs to stop, and then only allow it to go in reverse direction. So there's something else that we got to worry about. And if we didn't do that, I mean, one other thing we could do instead of that, instead of all that extra stuff, is maybe use a servo motor, or not a servo. Use a stepper motor, or I guess you could use a servo as well. And then the stepper motor could do it. Stepper motor doesn't need any, I already have the drivers for those, and I think the motors I have are powerful enough to do it. And they do reverse fairly easily, but I don't really want to use a stepper motor for something like that if I don't have to. I can use that for something else. But if I do, I can use it. I still have the issue with trying to connect the two together. So that right there will just have to be addressed when the time comes. But just like the motors, a regular stepper motor does not know where it's at. You can tell it to move this many rotations, and it'll rotate until it moves whatever that far, but it's not going to stop itself when it goes too far. So in that case, you need to put some kind of encoder on it, that way it can read that it's traveled this far, and it knows it's traveled that far. That way it doesn't crash when it's going too far, or open too far and start stripping things and whatever. So a lot of different questions, a lot of different answers that need to be come up with, and it's time consuming. So everything, like I've said before, it's like eating an elephant. How do you eat elephant? One bite at a time. And this is the same way, one bite at a time. So this is one little bite, and as the parts come in, as a few things come in, then I'll actually get to start testing things. And the biggest things that I need to test are opening up the vents, opening up the louvered sides, or the sides on it, and then turning on fans. Those will be about the best thing I can use when it starts getting hotter. And watering and stuff, worst case scenario, I can always set that to a water hose and just go out there and spray it several times a day. For a small little greenhouse, that's not that big a deal. If it were a really big greenhouse, I definitely would want to have it automated so that it sprays throughout and as many times as I want it to. But that's just one thing I can do, using some solenoid valves out of a washing machine or something like that, that would just open and close the water, which allowed it to turn on the water for everything. Not that big a deal, but that's the least of my concerns. So I think that's good enough for now. As you can see, there's a lot of this that just takes a lot of, it's not really hard, and when I get it, I will share the code for this, and I'll share everything about it when I get something I think is more of a finished product. This right here, just testing, and you guys don't need to worry about this, because the code, I've got a lot of stuff I just borrowed from people, and it's not anything great. It's just something that works this, and there's a lot of extra code in there because it's supposed to be doing other things. So, but as I get to it, as I get something that's more of a finished product and I see something that's working well, I will definitely share it with you guys. That way you can just basically just buy the same components, hook it up the exact same way, and I'll show exactly how to do it. And then just put the code that I give you, put it in there, and if you can understand it all, then you can modify it however you like. So it's really simple stuff, especially when somebody just basically hands it all to you. And that's what I plan on doing whenever I get it all together. If you got any questions, put it down in the comments. I'll answer as I can. And definitely hit the like, subscribe, the bell notification, all that good stuff. And until next time, y'all take care.